What is going on, snooker fans? It is another Monday after a tournament, so it is that time for another Snooker Digest episode. The tour last week went to Berlin for one of the biggest tournaments of the season, the German Masters. Now, if you're new around here, then welcome to the channel. Get nice and relaxed as I spend the next few minutes going through the main talking points from the 2025 Snooker German Masters. And I'll start by repeating something that seems to have come up during most of the tournaments that I've reviewed this season, and that is, yet again, it was a tournament where a couple of Chinese players enjoyed real success. There were two Chinese semi-finalists last week, and let's start with the first one, Zhao Guidong, who is continuing his fine season with his fifth semi-final appearance already of a tournament following similar runs at the Wuhan Open, International Championship, Scottish Open, and the Champion of Champions. I did mention how unfortunate he was not to get a call up to the Masters, and that's all because of the way the cut-offs worked. He was 17th at the time that the Masters was played, but because Neil Robertson was 17th at the time the draw was made, Robertson was the one to take O'Sullivan's place instead of Zhao Guidong. So he was very, very unlucky in that regard. But he is still in contention for an automatic seeding for the Crucible if he can keep this kind of form up. The 6-2 loss to Kyle Wilson in the semis last week meant that he missed out on the chance to get into the top 16 right now, and he does remain in 17th. But the gap between himself and Chris Wakelin is now considerably closer, and by virtue of now being third on the one-year list, he'll be playing in all of the bonus events that's coming up, which is where you need to be around about this stage of the season in order to target the real big money tournaments before the World Championship. His compatriot Yuan Xijun has had considerably less time in the limelight this season, but back-to-back wins in deciding frames against recent Masters champion Shaun Murphy, and then a resurgent Neil Robertson got him into just his second ever career semi-final 6 years after making his first out in Gibraltar. He does also have a further 5 career quarterfinals to his name as well, so his statistics for someone of just 24 years of age are pretty promising. I do think the distance between him at his best and his worst is alarming. However, the groundwork is definitely there for him to achieve something in the game. And as always, it will just be a matter of trying to find consistency. And he may not have reached the semi-finals, but it was another solid week for young Wu Yize, as he reached a third quarterfinal of the season. Well, fourth actually, with the inclusion of the snooker shootout. The statement win for him last week was against Mark Allen, coming through in a deciding frame, and just like Guidong, he is keeping himself in contention for a possible Crucible spot this season. He is a little bit further back at 21st in the rankings, but another big performance in one of the upcoming events could really boost his chances. And whilst we're on the topic of youngsters, 22-year-old Aaron Hill matched his best ever performance in a ranking event by making it to the quarterfinals with some very impressive results last week over players such as Tom Ford, Jimmy Robertson, and most notably Mark Williams. The importance of those results cannot be overstated either, because it has pushed him up to 55 in the rankings, which alleviates some pressure off of his shoulders, and he's now got some daylight between himself and Jamie Clark, who currently sits in 65th position. And as a result of some of these mentioned players going deep in the tournament last week, it did mean it wasn't such a great tournament for many of the higher seeds. Players such as Chris Wakelin, Mark Allen, Ali Carter, Jack Lazowski, Stuart Bingham, Mark Selby, Mark Williams, Luca Brissell and John Higgins all failed to make it to the last 16, and that's also coupled with the likes of O'Sullivan, Fafai and Ding all pulling out of the event, so the draw most definitely did open up pretty much from the get-go. And even Judd Trump failed to make it to his customary quarterfinal, as his progress to defend his title was halted by Neil Robertson in the last 16. And focusing on Neil, that was another big win for him as he continues his own quest to get a Crucible seeding, and I tell you now, that is going to be such an interesting battle to keep your eyes on over the next couple of months, because there are so many players in contention there. We of course saw a glimpse of the old Neil Robertson during his comeback win over John Higgins at the Masters, and this was a good way to follow that up. It's actually the 4th time already this season that Judd and Neil have faced each other, and they now both have 2 wins apiece. The only cause of frustration for Neil is he couldn't get himself going in the quarterfinals, because he may well have fancied going all the way after that result. He did, however, make 6 centuries last week, which took his career tally up to 972. I made a video last week about Judd's hunt for a century of centuries this season, but depending on how results go from now and the season end, the Australian could be on course to land his own century milestone at the Crucible. And I did also want to spend a minute on a player who has barely featured on this channel at all, and that is Anthony McGill. His run to the quarterfinals last week was the first time he has reached the last 8 of a tournament since last year's Welsh Open, which hopefully for his sake will act as a bit of a catalyst to halt his rather steep slide down the rankings recently, as he was starting to look over his shoulder at a potential race to keep his tour card. The 3 results he picked up over Pang Jung-soo, Luke Brissell and Zhang Anda were very welcomed, and he pushed the world champion all the way in the quarterfinals as well, so all in all, plenty of positives to take going forward, as his current ranking is far, far too low for his capability. But as always, I will finish on the 2 finalists. Starting Barry Hawkins, it is heartbreaking for him, it really is. He was within 3 frames of landing his first Triple Crown title in York, and 2 months later he got within a single frame of this title. But as tough as that will obviously be for him, he has ultimately been beaten by both of the most informed players in the world at the moment in those finals, and has put up a valiant effort in both as well. And I think he can count himself a touch unfortunate in the decider. He goes in off when presented with half a chance to steal the frame, and then he leaves a plant on for Kyren Wilson. And in a match that close, it often is the small rubs of the green that make the massive difference. Like I say, he should be buoyed by his performances recently, but how often have we seen Hawkins get so close to landing a big title, but more often than not, coming out on the wrong side of the result? But Kyren Wilson, this is a level of consistency that only a select few players have ever been able to produce in a season. I've talked previously about how the weight of a first World Championship crown can weigh heavy on players in the past, but Kyren has only become stronger. 3 titles now under his belt, and this comes a matter of weeks after that painful loss in London to Shaun Murphy. He did even say in that post-match interview that he would come back stronger in Germany, and to be fair to them, that's exactly what he's done. His self-belief is on a level it's never been before, and the results are backing that up. Now, I'm not going to be silly enough to suggest that the snooker gods will allow him to break the Crucible curse this season, but things are looking very, very rosy for him at the moment. And just away from what he's doing on the table, Kyren does appear to have made some enemies in the snooker world this season, and I have to be honest, I don't entirely know why. I am purely basing this on what I've seen on some Instagram posts and YouTube comment sections, so places like Twitter and Facebook could be very different, but it seems like he can't please anyone at the moment. Now, I will admit, some of the comments he made after the Masters loss didn't come across amazingly well, but shoving a microphone in a player's face after a loss is hard, and I don't think we should expect every single player to come out with these robotic, gracious loser interviews every single time. But the bigger issue fans seem to have with him this season is that he's trying too hard to prove he has a personality, which is just straight harsh in my opinion. If you blame someone for being robotic and not personable, how can you then still criticise them for changing that? The argument I'm seeing is that it's an obvious PR stunt to gain more fans. I personally don't see it that way, and his walk-on last night just came across as a man who is enjoying life as a world champion at the moment, to me. But even if it's right that he is trying to portray himself this way rather than it being genuine, you can't hate on a guy for both having no personality and then for trying to engage with fans, because then he just can't win no matter what he does. But that is all I have to say on that particular subject. You may disagree, but I think we can all agree that he has been a superb world champion so far this season. No matter what happens going forward, he has landed 3 big titles already, and that is a massive, massive achievement. And it does bode well for the future if we have a potential rivalry brewing between him and Judd over the next few years, because they both appear to be in their absolute peak, and for this season at least, have been head and shoulders above the rest of the field.